took a COVID test and it was negative, but he thought maybe if he would go for a little walk with his dog, he would feel better, but he did not, and his fever came back at that point. So yesterday afternoon we made the call that probably he should have come today. So just to let you know that Aaron and I are hunting this morning. And so what we're going to do, we're going to save this bulletin for today for next week. So Tom could just roll it over and use it again. So I'll kind of guide you and help you understand where we need to go next. So thank you, Bell Choir. That was very, very nice to hear that again. Wonderful. Are there guests that would like to be introduced? Susan is here with us today. Welcome. I'm not like a guest, but not really. We're glad to have you today. All right. Any announcements that need to be made?
I will be selling Girl Scout cookies today. For Troop 10739, my goal is to get to at least 1,000 boxes sold so that we can go to Denver. Oh yeah, so we take cash, check, and card if needed, and it will be happening after church in the fellowship hall. Most of them are $5, but our top aspects and Girl Scout symbols are $6. Oh, and we have a new cookie. It's the Adventurefuls, which are brownie on the outside and caramel in the middle with hard chocolate stripes on the top.
So we all need to have 10 boxes of there, right? Okay, so your goal is to sell 1,000 boxes. Oh my goodness, okay.
I'm trying to raise money for the Kids Out Challenge at my school, and it's from heart attacks and open heart surgery. We're trying to help get money so we can help save somebody's life, and so we can make a donation to help.
So will the money go to the hospital?
Not sure. They don't really. I think, but we take checks, cards, and money.
Checks, cards, and money.
For the American Heart Association.
Oh, American Heart Association. Sorry, I missed that. Okay, so we should see Solomon if we're interested in donating to that. Correct? Okay. Thank you, guys. Okay, cookies and healthy hearts.
Along the healthy heart side of things, the Lifeline folks are coming in March again this year to do the screenings and whatnot. And they gave the church on 2 or 3 vouchers that if you're going to go to Lifeline screening, do not buy your entry from them, buy it from the church because we get the money off of it. So if that's on your agenda, check it out.
Okay.
Bring money, we don't take.
Okay. Okay. It's a good deal. So, did everybody hear that? You need to check with the church and register. Is that the right word? Sign up.
I don't know how that works.
Just contact the church before March 22nd. Okay. So the screenings will be done in the fellowship hall. So if you happen to drop in that day, there's an entire fellowship hall that is full of health screening areas. Activity, I don't know what the right word. Okay. What about if you would please sign the book so that we know that you're here today? That would be great. Also, joys. Are there any joys that we'd like to share today? Oh, joy.
We have
Eddie.
anniversary.
Eddie and Barb have an anniversary coming up? looking from the bulletin that we put together last night instead of the bulletin. So, for the joys that are listed in the bulletin, let's say, praise be to God. And for Barbanetti's anniversary, praise be to God.
Just an update on Delta High School. The wrestling team finished the season. I believe they qualified one for the state tournaments, maybe more. Cedar Ridge did really well. I think they placed second in their region. They have like 12 wrestlers. Delta High School girls basketball, pretty much one wrapped up late by beating Grand Valley this weekend, and their tournaments will be coming up. So congratulations. Oh, and the swimming, Jillian Carlson finished 6th and 12th. I think this is about her 3rd or 4th year of getting a medal with the state swimming.
Cool.
Did really well.
So all of our athletes at Delta High School are doing great things. I'm really hot. Not hot fire, hot microphone. I'll move this down a little bit.
I changed it, just leave it with her.
Okay, thank you. I can hear the sound bouncing out. Yes, sir, Mr. Song.
Papa and Mom and Dad are going to Las Vegas. So they're never going to come with my big sister and the other sister.
Wow. So Mom and Dad are going to go have some fun on a trip to Las Vegas. And you guys are going to have some fun to get Grandma out. What's that? Granny and Granddad. Oh, okay. All right. So for that joy, for everybody gets to do something fun, we say, praise be to God.
For all those who brought food today for the food pantry
Yes.
Super Bowl, and we will have results later online, so see who won, see if we're correct. But also the Undy Sunday for those who brought our second annual monthly Undy Sunday, we appreciate it.
Okay, and there are some undies in here. So, Carol, we did have a question today. What's the most average size? That needs small men and women. Okay, all right, great. So we're providing all kinds of things for a lot of different people in our communities. So for that we say, praise be to God.
What are the buckets for?
Laura Lee and I would like to say we are very grateful and joyful. Most of you know she had knee surgery about 2 weeks ago, and it was very painful recovery, but it was just pain. She is doing quite well now, and hopefully we'll get this deep wound fixed after a year and a half of fight. But we are cautiously optimistic now, and therefore we're grateful.
All right. So Laura Lee has had a deep wound issue that's been cleaned out many times, over a year and a half. And it's just not healing, so she did have surgery 2 weeks ago and a week ago. And she's feeling better now, and hopefully we're on a good track and things will heal and you'll be done with this.
And we appreciate the flowers and the food.
Appreciate the flowers, the food, the prayers, the caring, and the loving. So for that joy, let's say, praise be to God. But also for her continued healing, let's ask, hear our prayers, O Lord. If there are no more joys, we'll move on to prayers. Concern.
And how about we?
I'd like prayers for my mother who has cancer, and it has something to do with either drug alertness
And what's his name?
or
Buck.
Houston.
Buck Houston has some kind of throat cancer, is that what I said? So prayers for him, let's ask. Hear our prayers, O Lord.
Hear that.
I don't know if many of you know Sheila Gray. She comes to our early service and sings, and sometimes she's here singing. Her husband had some kind of head injury yesterday, and he is in ICU at St. Mary's. So we need prayers for him and the family.
Okay. Prayers for Sheila Gray's husband, who is in the hospital, has some kind of a head injury yesterday. So prayers for him and healing we ask.
Hear our prayers, O Lord.
We need to keep Tom, and I don't, Stephanie and Robert aren't here, so I don't know what the status is with them, but for their family, let's ask.
Hear our prayers, O Lord.
I've been asking for prayers for my two uncles that are critically ill, and one of them passed away. And so family is on their way from California. So prayers for my extended family and for their immediate family.
Hear our prayers, O Lord.
Okay. I think Eddie has something to say to us about mission.
I'm here for your moment for missions.
Not working?
It's okay. It's not on. Okay. I did. It's okay. I can talk really loud. I'm here to talk about a covenant connection. We have a covenant connection with Kennedy Cruz. What this allows Kennedy to do is do his missionary work without worrying about monetary concerns. His housing is provided. So our covenant connection is $5 per member of the church annually, which supports him in his mission. He's in Cambodia now, correct? Yes. He kind of moved around. He's been here once. So that's what the buckets are for out here. You'll hear more about Kennedy Cruz from Sam, I think next week or the week after. So $5 per covers his expenses, or helps cover. We're not the only church who does this, of course. So that's our moment for missions. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you. Support for Kennedy Cruz, and you see these two silver buckets up here. You can drop $5 in, and that will cover your fee. Yeah. All right. If there are no other things, let's go to our call to worship. So this is not the call to worship. We're going to use that you'll stand and find your purple hymnal and turn to page 821. This is a singing response, and because we didn't have time to let the organist practice the singing part, we'll skip that. So we're going to just move right on into the words down below on page 821. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the lands.
Serve the Lord with gladness. Come into God's presence with singing.
Know that the Lord who made us is God.
We are the Lord's. We are the people of God, the sheep of God's pasture.
Enter God's gates with thanksgiving and God's courts with praise.
Give thanks and bless God's name.
For the Lord is good.
God's steadfast love endures forever. God's faithfulness to all generations.
And now let's turn to page 261 for the Lord advance.
Changed the anthem last night, but we forgot to tell Janet.
She's really flexible.
It's almost the same tune. 261.
I was right along with
Lord of the dance on 261.
Now we have to, we're going to give you Kelly praise because she is winging it now. I was
Choir was going to do Lord of the Dance as the intro. Wonderful song, and we thought maybe you would like to hear the words too, go along with that. And Janet, the last hymn, is going to be Bless Me the Tie Divine, song 557. You have 20 minutes. Good morning, everyone. We're delighted, Gayla and I are delighted to be here to be able to serve you this way this morning. And now ask you to go to God in silent meditation. Focus for a few minutes on your pew, how it feels on your back, the floor, how it feels on your legs and your feet, the sounds that you might hear as you close your eyes and listen for the small, still voice of God. God, we ask your blessings on this day. We ask you to be with us, a small congregation, as we enjoy our time together and enjoy our time with you this morning. We're grateful for Sabbath morning that you send us each week, that we might have the time with you to get to know you better, to hear from you words of wisdom, words of love. Be with us this hour that we might open our hearts and minds to hear your word, that we might take it to our hearts and begin to practice it. This morning we ask you for special blessings for those who are grieving at this time, for those who are in pain or in sorrow or sickness. We ask especially by name for the folks in Ukraine that are facing possibly a war that will ravage their homeland. We ask for world peace, that you might strike wisdom into the hearts of the world leaders that they might avoid a massive conflict. We ask for grace for the Hazelwood family, that Tom will get well soon, that Stephanie and Robert will be able to adjust and deal with Tom and deal with illness. We ask for your grace and healing and grieving for the family of Lytle Beach, Gayla's uncle, Dee's brother-in-law, Donna Widener's brother-in-law, and all of their extended family. We ask for healing for Dan Gray and as he recovers from a head injury, and grace for Sheila and the kids as they deal with Dan being in the hospital. We ask for Rosemary Byers, who had a stroke this weekend, for her family and for her quick recovery and no lingering long-term effects. We ask continued prayers and arms around Laura Lee Chastain as she continues to heal. We're blessed to have her with us today and hope that that blessing can continue. We ask for your grace for Buck Houston as he struggles with throat cancer and the treatments and healing that will come from that. We know you are the great physician. We know that you can heal these as many others. We just ask that you would attend to them as your grace might have it. We ask you this morning to hear our prayers and to sustain us as we go about our day. We ask this each individually in our own ways, many times a day as we pray to you. And every Sunday morning we ask this as a corporate body, as we go to you in prayer with the prayer that Jesus taught us as part of the Sermon on the Mount. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Okay, it's time for the gift kits to come forward. Good morning. Thanks for joining me. So, do you guys know what a blessing is? Nazi war. That was a huge blessing, wasn't it? Yeah. So every day in our lives we have blessings. We have good things that happen to us. The most important thing we need to do is to recognize our blessings and take a minute and say, how nice was that? How wonderful was that? How kind were they? Blessings are a big part of what Jesus would like us to learn about. And so we're going to talk today about the Beatitudes. And we've kind of been learning about it in adult Sunday school. So we're going to carry that through today and talk a little bit more about what Jesus was trying to teach us. So do you guys learn things from Jesus? Yeah. Being kind. Is that a blessing? Yeah. Sharing. And what? Music. Absolutely, music is a blessing. Miss Joanna is being very patient with her music today. She is a blessing. And the bell choir is a blessing. And all the people who work in graphics is a blessing. Art is a blessing. Can you think of any song? Jesus, anything Jesus taught us about having blessings or gaining blessings? What about loving your neighbor? Love one another. Caring for the homeless. Exactly. And you think that's a blessing for them? Okay. So I want you guys to think today about how you can be a blessing to somebody else. Giving someone Valentine's. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day. Heart Day. And on Valentine's Day, what do we show? We show love, don't we? Yeah. So tomorrow, and starting today, really, if you wanted to continue it throughout the week too, you could show blessings to other people. Right? And each other. Okay, we'll talk about that another day. All right. So I think you guys are blessings to all of us. Did you know how much the people in this congregation love our children? Because you are blessings to us. Come say a prayer. Dear God.
Dear God,
Thank you for your blessings.
thank you for your blessings.
Thank you for our world,
Thank you for our world,
which is a blessing.
which is a blessing.
Thank you for each other,
Thank you for each other,
which are blessings.
which are our blessings.
And thank you for tomorrow.
Thank you for tomorrow.
It helps us remember extra special blessings. Remember extra special blessings. In the name of Jesus we pray. In the name of Jesus we pray. And with our blessings. Amen.
Thank you, Gayla. Now we can use the bulletin for one short piece here under Scripture. The living God is with us. A reading from Matthew. May we be equipped by these words to walk in love for God, ourselves, our neighbors, all people, and all creation. But the Matthew I'm going to read from is not Matthew 16. I'm going to read from Matthew 5, verses 1 through 12. These verses are going to be familiar to you because we call them the Beatitudes. Here's what my study Bible says about the Beatitudes. They call them the blessings of Jesus. The blessings of Jesus are called Beatitudes because the Latin Vulgate translates the Greek word for blessed as beate, B-E-A-T-I. No single word can capture all that Jesus is communicating with this term here. He is describing the special favor of God towards his people, both physically and spiritually, and the consequence of living within that favor, what Matthew calls the kingdom of heaven. The Beatitudes describe the lifestyle and character of a follower of Jesus. Jesus calls men and women to follow him as he proclaims a message of the kingdom to Israel. Those who are blessed have repented in response to the proclamation of the kingdom. The Spirit endows, leads to proclamation, and blesses the poor, the humble, and the righteous. God blesses conveys the idea of divine origin and approval, fulfillment, reversal, and the condition of obedience required in order to enjoy the blessings. The blessings are inaugurated with the Messiah's coming, with a confident hope that they will be enjoyed eternally and completely. Matthew 5, 1 through 12. From the New Living Translation. One day, as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. The words of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Music is a blessing, isn't it? Wonderful. Thanks, choir. Thanks, Bell Choir. Thanks, Janet. So, our message for today, Gayla and I are going to present to you, is going to be familiar to you. We're going to talk about the Beatitudes. I just read them from the New Living Translation. But we're going to maybe put a little different spin on it for you, maybe get you to think about them in a little different way. And the way we're going to do that is that I'm going to read a verse of the Beatitudes from the New Living Translation, and then Gayla's going to use a different Bible. It's called The Message, and it's by Eugene Peterson. And the difference in the two versions is that my Bible is a direct translation of old manuscripts, and trying to get it as accurate as possible. And then Eugene Peterson took a Bible, I think he used the New Revised Standard Version, and he put his own spin on it. He reinterpreted it and then gave us his interpretation of what those particular verses meant. So we get a take from Eugene Peterson, and then Gayla and I will reflect about that. We're going to go kind of verse by verse. So a little bit of background for you in the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes are the first 12 verses of the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount, as recorded by Matthew in Matthew 5, is the chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew. Matthew 5, 1 through 12 is the Beatitudes, and then the Sermon on the Mount goes beyond that. Verses 1 and 2. One day Jesus saw the crowds gathering and went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them.
When Jesus saw his ministry drawing huge crowds, he climbed a hillside. Those who were apprenticed to him, the committed, climbed with him. Arriving at a quiet place, he sat down and taught his climbing companions. This is what he said.
Verse 3. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs.
Verse 3. You're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there is more of God and his rule.
So this is why I think Eugene Peterson is using a different translation of the Bible, because some translations of the Bible say blessed are the poor, and some say blessed are the poor in spirit. And Eugene Peterson clearly is talking about not poor people, not people who are poor physically or economically or financially, but people who are poor in spirit when he says, you're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. Isn't that a good way of saying that you're poor in spirit? You're at the end of your rope. And what Eugene Peterson points out is that when we are down, when we are out, when we're at the end of our rope, when we're depressed, that's when the time that we need God the most, isn't it? And that's when we see the kingdom of heaven more closely. Verse 4. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
You're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you.
So, until I read Eugene Peterson's version, I always envisioned people who are in mourning were people who had lost close people to them, a spouse or a parent or a child or somebody else close to them. But in reading Eugene Peterson's version, he said, you've lost something that's most dear to you. Well, that could be your parent or your spouse, but maybe it's something else. Maybe it's your home. Think about those folks in Superior, Louisville about a month ago. They're in mourning right now, aren't they? It could be a pet. Most of us are really attached to our pets, and when our dog or our cat dies, we go through a period of mourning. We've lost something that is most dear to us. Why is that a blessing, to be in mourning? Well, the answer is that you will be embraced by the one most dear to you. In other words, God is closest to you in times when you need him the most. And many times when we're in mourning is when we need him the most. Verse 5. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth.
You're blessed when you're content with just who you are. No more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought.
So the New Living Translation says the word humble. Eugene Peterson says content with who you are. Most of us haven't heard this verse that way. In the King James Version, it says, blessed are the meek. That's probably what you've heard, is blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now, what's the difference between a meek person or a humble person or a person who's content with just the way they are? Here's my take on it. A humble person is a person that has not let their ego get in the way, that they've given themselves up, and their ego is not between them and God. Jesus in other parts of the Bible talks about that a lot. He says you have to lose yourself to find me. You have to give yourself up to be part of me. You have to carry your own cross. Those are all ways of saying you have to let your ego get out of your way. I think that's just another definition of humbleness. And inheriting the whole earth. I love Eugene's Peterson's version. He says, the moment you find yourself proud owners of everything that can't be bought. Isn't that what it's all about? All the things that we can't buy is what this is all about, isn't it? And so when you're humble, you're more likely to enjoy the things that can't be bought. Verse 6. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied.
You're blessed when you've worked up a good appetite for God. He's food and drink in the best meal you'll ever eat.
So I love this metaphor that Jesus puts out there. This is a very physical metaphor, not usual sometimes for Jesus to say hunger and thirst. We've all been hungry. Probably nobody in this room has been really, really hungry, but we've all gone periods of fasting or something where you felt hungry. And we've all been thirsty at some point in time. So we understand what that means. What does it mean to hunger and thirst for justice? Or in Eugene Peterson's word, worked up a good appetite for God. It means that you feel that physical need, not just a spiritual need, but a physical need that only God can satisfy. He's food and drink and the best meal you'll ever eat. So Jesus also uses food in other metaphors, especially in the Last Supper scene. Remember? That's where the bread and the wine became a really physical manifestation of the metaphor of the body and blood. Verse 7. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy.
You're blessed when you care. At the moment of being careful, you find yourselves cared for.
So I've always interpreted this verse about being merciful as speaking to those in power. Because it seems to me that only those people who have the ability to be merciful to other people can show mercy. If you're at the bottom end of the spectrum, how do you show mercy to somebody who's above you on the spectrum? So only those in the hierarchy could show mercy to those below them. That's not Eugene Peterson's take on this. His take is that the word mercy also means care, and that any of us can be merciful to other people when we care for them. And at that moment, you will find yourself be caring for. I'm sure we've all had that experience where you helped someone else, or you were merciful to someone else, or you cared for someone else, and you felt better about that for having done it. Verse 8. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God.
You're blessed when you get your inside world, your mind and your heart, put right. Then you can see God in the outside world.
So I think a lot of us have struggled with this verse because it says you're blessed when your hearts are pure. And most of us don't feel that our hearts are very pure, and we're probably never going to get to a pure heart. Eugene Peterson's take on it's a little different. He says, you're blessed when you're enough for yourself. When you feel like your inside and your outside are put right. Put yourself first. And I'm reminded of the admonition when you're telling us in the airplane about when the oxygen mask falls and you're supposed to put it on yourself before you put it on your child. Is that what Jesus is saying here, is to get yourself right first before you go out and try to get someone else right? I'm thinking that maybe that's part of the message from the story where Jesus told those folks who were trying to stone the adulteress that for the one to had not committed a sin, to stone her first, that we have to be right with ourselves before we can be right with God. Tom's going to start a study in Lent that he's, I think, entitling Good Enough. And it's all about how we need to be good enough for ourselves before we can be good enough for God. And I think maybe that's what this is saying. Your heart is pure when you're good enough for yourself. Verse 9. God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God.
You're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family.
Isn't that a really good definition of peace? We're not talking about world peace, although we could be talking about that. But we're talking about peace in relationships with each other. And when we cooperate with people instead of competing or fighting with them, that's a really good definition of peace, I think. And so when we can show other people how to do that, first by doing it ourselves, then we're on the path to being part of the kingdom of heaven. This is one of those places in the Bible that gave Jesus the reputation of being what they called the nonviolent rabbi. He taught that change can come by nonviolent means. And of course, that was picked up later by Gandhi and other people. And that change can come by persuasion and not necessarily by violence. That you can be peaceful by being cooperative instead of fighting. Verse 10. God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs.
You're blessed when your commitment to God provokes persecution. The persecution drives you even deeper into God's kingdom.
So I think maybe most of us in this room have a little trouble relating to this commitment, this discussion about persecution, because I doubt that many of us have ever been persecuted, especially for our beliefs about Christianity. But it occurred to me that there is a type of persecution going on in our society right now. Have any of you ever posted to Facebook or sent a tweet out and had people disagree with you about that tweet or that? Some of you are smiling. I know some of you have done that. And what happens to that disagreement? Does it sometimes get kind of rough and violent? Yeah, because social media is such an anonymous thing that you can be rough and violent and there's no consequences for that. So in my version of today's version of this beatitude, it would be, you're blessed when you say the right thing, what's called speaking truth to power. And even though somebody criticizes you for that, if you're saying the right thing, then God is smiling upon you and blessing you. Verse 12. God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way.
Not only that, count yourselves blessed every time people put you down or throw you out or speak lies about you to discredit me. What it means is that the truth is too close for comfort, and they are uncomfortable. You can be glad when that happens. Give a cheer even, for though they don't like it, I do. And all heaven applauds. And I know that you are in good company. My prophets and witnesses have always gotten into this kind of trouble.
So there's a grammatical change in this particular verse that's really important. In the other 7 verses, it starts out in the New Living Translation, God blesses those, and then who are poor, who are humble. In Eugene's version, it starts out, you're blessed when. But when you get to verse 11, it changes, and it said, God blesses you. And we have to remember who he's talking to. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and through his disciples to us. So now this is a direct blessing, and not an indirect blessing to the poor or to the humble or to those who hunger and thirst, but a direct blessing to us when we do something. He's blessing us when we're being put down because we are his followers. He was talking to his disciples, and what this is a word of encouragement, because he knew that he was going to be around to encourage them when they were out there trying to spread the gospel and the good news. They were going to get persecuted. He knew, he could see that coming. And so this is a word of encouragement to him when he's telling the good news, when they're telling the good news and they're being put down and persecuted, that he is with them, and that they are part of the kingdom of heaven at that point. Going back to Facebook, same thing. You're going to be persecuted if you speak truth to power on Facebook or in the newspaper or wherever, and as long as you know that what you're speaking is the truth, you're being blessed when you do that. So this is an admonition to keep courage and keep going in the face of that persecution. That's the ending of the Beatitudes. Thanks be to God. Now if the bell choir would like to come up. And as they're preparing, we can prepare ourselves by meditating on the Beatitudes or something else that you have heard that might have touched you. And you could also bring your offerings up to put in the baskets at this time if you choose to. just a minute to let the choir get back. And our closing hymn will be number 557. 557. Blessed be the tie that binds. Please stand as you're able and join together in the last hymn. As we go forth this week to celebrate Valentine's Day, let us remember that that day of love doesn't just end on Monday, that it should be Valentine's Day all week and all day, every week, every year. So in the words of Tom, get out there and find somebody to love. Amen.